The roar was a physical thing. It wasn't just sound you heard with your ears. You felt it in your chest, a deep, thrumming vibration that traveled up through the soles of your feet. It was the sound of 20,000 people, a sea of flickering phone lights and eager faces, all focused on one spot, center stage. And on that stage, bathed in a spotlight so sharp it seemed to cut her out of the air, was Lena Vance. From where she stood, 2 steps behind and just to the left, the singer watched Lena work. She didn't have a flashy stage name. To the crew, the band, and the payroll, she was just Maya. Her world was measured in quiet spaces, the hushed concentration of a recording booth, the soft chatter of musicians tuning up backstage, the whisper of her own footsteps as she moved to her mark. Her place was here, in the shadow of the spotlight, not within it. For 3 years, Maya's job had been to make Lena Vance sound fuller, richer, more perfect. Her voice wasn't the main event. It was the support, the polish, the hidden strength in the chorus. She was the layer of sound you might not notice was there until it was gone. She knew every breath Lena would take before she took it, every slight turn of a phrase, every practiced ad-lib. She was a part of the machine that was the Lena Vance experience, essential but invisible. The tour had been long, 6 months across continents, in and out of buses, planes, and identical hotel rooms that all smelled faintly of cleaning products and loneliness. This was the final night, the grand finale in a hometown arena. The air crackled with a special kind of exhausted triumph. Everyone, from the roadies to the lighting techs, had a little extra energy, a smile that came easier. The finish line was in sight. Maya adjusted her in-ear monitor, the world outside quieting to a muffled roar as she heard the familiar mix of the band, and Lena's voice, crisp and clear. She wore a simple black outfit, designed to blend, not stand out. Her microphone was in her hand, its weight as familiar as her own heartbeat. She took a slow, deep breath, the kind that grounded her. Just another show, she told herself. The last one. The concert was a well-oiled spectacle. Lights flashed in time with the thunderous beats. Pyrotechnics exploded at the climax of the biggest hits. Lena was a force of nature, dancing across the stage, her voice powerful and confident as she belted out hit after hit. She owned the crowd, talking to them between songs, making them laugh, making them scream louder. Maya did her part. She harmonized perfectly. She moved when she was supposed to move. She was a professional ghost. Then, during one of Lena's quick costume changes, the video host for the arena's screens came out to keep the energy up. He was a cheerful, loud man in a bright jacket. He started talking to the front rows, cracking jokes, getting people to cheer for their city. His gaze swept over the stage, past the waiting band members, and landed on Maya, who was sipping from a water bottle, trying to stay present. "Hey, look at this," the host boomed, his voice echoing. "We've got some serious talent holding down the fort here. How about a round of applause for the incredible band and these amazing backup singers?" The crowd obliged with a warm, generous wave of noise. Maya offered a small, tight smile and a wave, already shrinking back inside herself. It was part of the routine. But then, as the host's eyes scanned the front row, he stopped. "Oh, check this out. We've got a request." A young woman, her face flushed with excitement, was holding a sign above her head. It was neon pink, clearly handmade. In big, glittery letters, it read, "Let Maya sing." A few people around the girl whooped. The host chuckled. "Let Maya sing. Huh, I like it. The people have spoken." He gave Maya an exaggerated thumbs up. The camera, following his lead, swung to her and projected her face, 30 feet tall. On the massive screens flanking the stage, she was caught mid-sip, her eyes wide with deer in headlights surprise. She managed another awkward smile, her free hand giving a little stop-it wave. The crowd laughed, a friendly, encouraging sound. The host, having gotten his moment, moved on. Maya's heart, which had leapt into her throat, slowly settled. It was a sweet gesture, probably from a superfan who read every credit. It was over. She faded back into the background of the stage as the host introduced the next segment. But then Lena burst back onto the stage, transformed into a new, even shinier outfit. The crowd erupted anew. As the band kicked into the next song, Lena sauntered over to Maya's side of the stage during her first verse. As she passed, singing effortlessly into her headset mic, she leaned in, her voice just loud enough for Maya to hear over the monitor mix. "You've got a fan club," she said, her tone playful, but with an edge Maya knew all too well. It was the edge that said, "This is my stage." The show continued. An hour in, during a slower song where Lena sat on a stool at the front of the stage. She again spotted the neon pink sign bobbing in the front row. She pointed at it, and the camera found it again. There it is again. Lena laughed into the microphone. Her voice was sweet, amused. You're very persistent, sweetie. Maya's a shy girl, though. She likes it back there where it's safe. The crowd chuckled. Lena gave a wink, a queen benevolently acknowledging an amusing peasant request. It felt like a pat on the head. For Maya, standing rigidly in her spot, the heat of the lights suddenly felt hotter. It became a thing, a running gag. Lena, the charismatic superstar, playing with her shy backup singer. Before the final encore, Lena stood at the edge of the stage, sweating and glorious, drinking in the adoration. You guys, she shouted. This has been the most incredible tour of my life. Thank you. The arena shook with noise. As it died down, she gestured vaguely behind her. And hey, maybe next tour, we'll even let Maya have a line or two, since you asked so nice. The crowd cheered, thinking it was all part of the fun, a shared joke. Maya felt a knot tightening in her stomach. This wasn't fun. It was exposure. She felt naked under the lights, even though no one was directly looking at her. She was a prop in Lena's show of magnanimity. She wanted the floor to swallow her. She just had to get through 2 more songs, just 2. Then she could disappear into the darkness of the wings, onto the waiting tour bus, and back into her silent, anonymous life. The band started the intro to Lena's signature power ballad, Echo. It was the emotional peak of the show, the song everyone waited for. The arena lights dimmed, leaving a single, stark spotlight on Lena. Thousands of phone lights flickered on, creating a galaxy of tiny stars. Maya closed her eyes for a second, losing herself in the familiar, haunting opening chords. This was her favorite part of the show. Her harmony in the chorus was a cascade of notes, and she loved singing it. For these few minutes, she could just be a voice in the dark. Lena began to sing, her voice trembling with practiced emotion. She poured her heart into the first verse and chorus. The crowd was utterly silent, captivated. As the music swelled toward the second chorus, Maya stepped forward on her mark, took a breath, and opened her mouth to deliver her harmony. But Lena never sang the line instead. In the middle of a bar, Lena Vance stopped. She held up her hand, a sharp, commanding gesture. The band, confused but professionally obedient, faltered and went silent. The sudden quiet in the vast arena was shocking, heavier than any noise. 20,000 people held their breath, unsure if it was a technical problem or part of the act. Lena turned. She walked away from the audience, away from the galaxy of phone lights, and straight toward Maya. The single spotlight followed her, trapping them both in its circle. Lena's face was a mask of sparkling sweat and wide, performative generosity. She stopped an arm's length away. The look in her eyes was not kind. It was a challenge, glittering and hard. She brought her microphone to her lips. In the dead silence, her voice was crystal clear, echoing to the very back rows. It wasn't the tone she used with the crowd. It was colder, sharper, laced with a dare. You see that sign all night? Okay, fine. A titter of nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. Lena smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. She reached out, not touching Maya, but gesturing her forward, into the spotlight's core. Maya, honey, come here. It was not a request. It was a royal decree, a trap dressed as a gift. Take the verse. Lena's smile widened. Let's hear what you've got. The silence in the arena didn't just hang in the air. It pressed down. It was a thick, heavy blanket that had been thrown over the roar of the crowd just seconds before. 20,000 people, all their energy and noise, had been switched off. All that was left was the hum of the massive sound system and the frantic, pounding rhythm of Maya's own heart. She could feel it, a frantic bird trapped in her ribcage. The sound of it filled her ears, louder than any drum. For a long, terrible moment, she couldn't move. She was frozen, a statue dressed in black, under a light so hot it felt like it was trying to burn her alive. Her eyes locked with Lena's. Up close, under the spotlight's glare, she could see the fine shimmer of sweat on the superstar's forehead, the perfect line of her eyeliner, the tiny, tight smile that was fixed in place. It was a smile for the audience, but the eyes were different. They were watchful, calculating. They said, well, go on. It was the nudge from behind that broke the spell. One of the stage managers, a man with a headset and a worried look, gave her a gentle push between the shoulder blades. The message was clear. Move. You have to move. Her legs, stiff and uncooperative, carried her the 3 steps forward. It felt like walking through deep water. Each step was too loud on the stage floor. The single spotlight, which had followed Lena, now widened to include her, but it felt like it was pinning her there. From the corner of her eye, she saw the band. The guitarist looked down at his instrument, uncomfortable. The drummer just stared, his sticks resting on his knees. They were as trapped as she was. Someone she didn't see who thrust a microphone into her hand. It was a different one from her own, heavier, colder. Her own mic, the one that felt like an extension of her arm, was still hanging from its stand behind her. Useless, the crowd began to stir. The initial shock was wearing off, replaced by a wave of murmurs, a collective, confused whisper that rolled through the stands. A few people clapped, a hesitant, scattered sound meant to be encouraging. Someone shouted, "You can do it!" From the darkness. It felt like a spear thrown from a great distance, missing its mark. Lena took 2 graceful steps back, out of the spotlight's brightest point, but not out of it completely. She was a silhouette now, an audience of one standing right there on the stage. She crossed her arms, that smile still playing on her lips. She nodded slowly at Maya, a queen granting a subject permission to speak. Maya's mouth was completely dry. Her tongue felt like it was made of sandpaper. She tried to swallow, but there was nothing to swallow. She looked out, really looked. Before, the crowd was a dark, noisy sea, a single creature. Now, she could see individual faces, people leaning forward, phones raised, their screens glowing like tiny, judgmental eyes. People with their heads tilted waiting, people already looking bored, as if this interruption was ruining their night. Her mind went blank, completely, utterly blank. The lyrics to Echo, a song she had sung hundreds of times, a song whose every breath and pause she knew better than her own name, vanished. They were just gone. She could remember the melody, a haunting thread of notes in her head, but the words had dissolved into static. A cold, sharp panic started in her stomach and shot up through her chest. This was the worst moment of her life. This was the nightmare she'd had since she was a kid. The one where you're on stage and you've forgotten everything. Only this was real. The lights were real. The silence was real. Lena's waiting stare was real. She saw the first flicker of change on Lena's face. The tight smile softened into something more genuine amusement, a spark of relief in her eyes, as if a worry had been put to rest. See, that look seemed to say, I gave her the chance. She's just a backup singer for a reason. That flicker, that tiny glimpse of triumph, did something inside Maya. It cut through the panic like a knife. A sudden, hot flash of anger mixed with a deep, drowning wave of shame. She wasn't just failing herself. She was performing her failure for Lena's satisfaction. She was proving Lena right in front of the whole world. The anger was familiar. It was the same feeling she got when people talked over her in the studio, when her ideas were dismissed with a pat on the head. It was the quiet burn she carried for every time she was told to just harmonize, to stay in the background. It was a small, hot coal that had been smoldering inside her for years, buried under layers of politeness and professionalism. That coal flared. She didn't look at Lena anymore. She didn't look at the sea of faces. She looked down at her feet, at the scuffed black tape marking her spot on the stage floor. She closed her eyes tight. For 3 long seconds, the arena was dead quiet. You could hear a cough from the upper balcony. You could hear the rustle of someone's jacket. She opened her eyes, but she didn't look up. She looked at nothing. Her vision turned inward. She wasn't in an arena anymore. She was back in her small apartment, singing to the peeling paint on the wall. She was in her first car, the one that rattled, singing along to the radio to drown out the sound of the engine. She was in her grandmother's kitchen, a child learning hymns from an old, out-of-tune piano. She lifted the cold, heavy microphone. Her hand was trembling. She brought it to her lips. She took a breath, not a shallow, panicked gasp, but a deep, slow pull of air that filled her lungs completely. It was the breath her first voice teacher had taught her, the one that started in the stomach and rose like a column of calm. She didn't nod to the band. She didn't give a cue. She just started. The first note was soft, almost a whisper into the microphone. It was the first note of the verse, but she didn't hit it the way Lena did, all power and flash. She approached it from below, sliding into it with a vulnerability that made the air itself seem to still. It wasn't a perfect note. There was a tiny, human crack in it, a tremor of the fear she was still feeling. But then she let the note go and moved to the next word. And something changed. The voice that came out for the second word and the third was not her backup singer voice. That voice was clean, high, and careful, a tool for blending. This was something else entirely. It was lower, richer. It had a darkness to it, a texture like rough velvet. It didn't sound practiced. It sounded broken open. She wasn't singing Lena's song anymore. She was pulling the song apart and finding a new one hiding inside it. Where Lena soared, Maya lingered. She bent a note, holding it, letting it waver with an emotion that felt too raw to be part of a pop show. She didn't just sing about an echo. Her voice became the echo, lonely, haunting, reaching for something it could never quite hold. The band, professional to their bones, began to stir. The pianist, watching her intently, heard where she was going and laid down a single, soft chord to support her. The bass player followed, adding a low, warm pulse that cradled her voice. Maya forgot about the words. They came back, but they didn't matter. She was past the words. She was pouring everything into the sound, the 3 years of standing in the shadows, the loneliness of hotel rooms, the quiet frustration of being unheard, the pure, simple love of melody that had gotten her into this mess in the first place. It all came flooding out through her voice. She reached the end of the verse, a place where Lena usually took a big breath to belt the chorus. Maya didn't belt. She did the opposite. She pulled back. The last line became a sigh, a breathy, intimate confession that seemed to travel directly to every single person listening, as if she were singing it right into their ear in the middle of all that silence. And then she stopped. The final note faded into the humming quiet. For a full 5 seconds, nothing happened. The crowd was caught, suspended in the feeling she had created. They had come for a fireworks display and had been given a single, lit match in a dark room, and it had somehow illuminated more. Then, it broke. It started not with a cheer, but with a collective gasp, a rush of exhalation, as if 20,000 people had been holding the same breath. And then the sound hit. It wasn't the programmed roar for the superstar. It was louder, wilder, more real. It was a wave of pure, shocked astonishment that exploded from the seats and crashed onto the stage. People weren't just clapping. They were screaming, jumping up and down, their faces stunned. On the stage, Maya finally blinked. The inward focus shattered. The sound rushed in, overwhelming her. She took a stumbling half-step back, her hand falling to her side, the microphone suddenly weighing 1,000 pounds. She looked over at Lena. The superstar's smile was still there, but it was frozen now, stuck. The amused, calculating light in her eyes had been completely erased, replaced by a blank, wide-eyed stare. She looked like someone who had opened a door expecting a closet, and had instead stumbled off a cliff. She was still in the spotlight, but for the first time all night, she looked small. She looked like the backup singer. She uncrossed her arms, her hands fluttering uselessly at her sides, before she remembered herself and began to clap. Too. She stepped forward, reaching out to put an arm around Maya, trying to pull her into the moment, to reclaim it. But Maya didn't feel the arm. She didn't hear the deafening roar anymore. The world had tunneled down to the beating of her own heart and one simple, terrifying thought echoing in the newfound silence inside her head. What have I just done? The cold, heavy microphone felt like a block of ice in her hand. For 3 long heartbeats, Maya stood there, trapped in the spotlight's white-hot eye. The silence was a roaring thing in her ears. She could see Lena's face, that painted-on smile of expectation. She could see the crowd, a dark, restless ocean waiting for a splash. Her own mind was empty, a white room with all the doors locked. Then, she looked at Lena's eyes, not at the smile, but at the eyes, and in them, she saw it. It was a tiny flicker, there and gone. It wasn't kindness or hope. It was amusement. It was the look of someone watching a kitten try to climb a wall, knowing it would tumble back down. That flicker said, I knew it. This is why you stand in the back. And something in Maya's stomach, something that had been curled up tight and small for years, suddenly snapped. It wasn't anger. Not exactly. It was hotter and colder than anger. It was a pure, sharp feeling of no. No, she would not be the punchline. No, she would not stand there and choke just to prove a point. No. She stopped looking at Lena. She stopped looking at the crowd. Her vision dropped to the scuffed black floor of the stage. The world shrank down to that small circle of light and the sound of her own blood rushing. She closed her eyes. Inside the darkness, she wasn't on a stage. She was 8 years old, standing on a wooden stool in her grandmother's kitchen. The linoleum was cool under her bare feet. Her grandmother was at the sink, washing dishes, her back turned, and Maya was singing, just for the joy of it, just to fill the quiet, sunlit room. There was no one to impress. No one was even listening. She was just singing to hear the sound. She was 16, in her first car, a rusted old thing that shook when it idled. The radio was on, fuzzy with static, playing an old soul song. She sang along, her voice twisting around the melody, trying things, hitting wrong notes, laughing at herself in the empty vehicle. The sound was for her, and her alone. She was 22, in a tiny, airless rehearsal room, singing the same harmony line over and over for a producer who never looked up from his phone. Her voice was a tool then, a brush painting someone else's picture. It was a job. She tucked all the feeling away, made it neat and small and professional. All those versions of her voice, the joyful one, the experimenting one, the hidden one, they were still in there. They had been waiting. She opened her eyes. She didn't look up. She just lifted the microphone. Her hand was steady now. She took a breath, but it wasn't the shallow gasp of panic. It was a deep, anchoring breath that started low in her belly and filled her lungs completely. It was the first real breath she'd taken since Lena stopped the music, and then she began. The first sound was not a note. It was almost a sigh, a release of air into the microphone. So quiet the people in the back rows probably couldn't hear it, but those close saw her lips move, saw the intensity on her face, and they leaned in. The first real note, when it came, was soft, fragile. It was the right note for the song, but it sounded nothing like Lena's version. Lena's voice was a polished sword. This was a raw strand of silk, threatening to tear. It had a scratch in it, the ghost of the fear she was pushing through. Then came the second word, and everything changed. It was like a door blowing open in a quiet house. The voice that came out for that second word was lower. It came from a deeper place. It had a warmth to it, a darkness, like the rich soil under fallen leaves. It wasn't pretty in a conventional way. It was interesting. It had stories in it. She wasn't thinking about the lyrics anymore. The words were just shapes her voice could move through. She bent a note, holding it, letting it tremble on the edge of breaking. She didn't belt. She poured. The sound was intimate, like she was telling a secret to the person in the very last row. The band, who had been frozen in confusion, suddenly woke up. They were professionals. They heard where she was going. The pianist, a man with kind eyes, was the first to move. He listened for a second, his head cocked, then his hands found a simple, beautiful chord on the keys. It wasn't the big, crashing chord from the original arrangement. It was something softer, sadder, perfect for the voice that was now floating above it. The bass player joined in, adding a low, heartbeat thrum that cradled the melody. Maya didn't hear them join. She was somewhere else. She was singing to her grandmother in that sunlit kitchen. She was singing to her younger self in that rusty car. She was singing out every lonely hotel room, every silent meal eaten alone, every idea she'd ever had that was patted on the head and put aside. She was singing for the sheer, terrifying joy of finally being heard. Even if it was by 20,000 strangers. She reached the middle of the verse, a place where the song usually swelled. She didn't swell. She did the opposite. She pulled back even more. Her voice became a whisper against the microphone, a confidential murmur that made the entire arena hold its breath to catch it. You could have heard a pin drop in that vast space. Then, as the line ended, she let her voice rise, not in a shout, but in a clear, strong arc of sound. It was powerful, but it wasn't aggressive. It was a cry of release. It was the sound of something finally breaking free after being held down for too long. In that moment, she forgot Lena existed. She forgot the crowd existed. There was only the vibration in her throat, the feeling in her chest, and the truth of the sound. On the side of the stage, Lena's smile had vanished. The amused, confident look was gone. Her face had gone slack with shock. Her eyes, so sharp and calculating before, were wide, unblinking. She looked like someone who had just seen a magic trick they couldn't explain. The arm she had crossed over her chest slowly fell to her side. She took a small, unconscious step backward, out of the brightest part of the light, as if the spotlight was no longer hers to stand in. She was just watching, her mouth slightly open. Maya finished the verse. The last note hung in the air, pure and clear, before it faded into silence for 5 full seconds. Nothing happened. The crowd was stunned. They had come for a pop concert, for fireworks and fun. They had not come for this. This was raw. This was real. This was art happening right in front of them, unplanned and unforgettable. The silence was one of total, breathless awe. Then, it shattered. It started with one person, a woman in the front, leaping to her feet, her hands clasped over her mouth as if to hold in a sob. Then another, then a dozen, then a wave. The sound that erupted wasn't just applause. It was a roar of pure emotion shock. delight, wonder, and a kind of collective triumph. They were screaming not just for a singer, but for the moment itself. They had witnessed something true. On stage, the sound crashed over Maya like a physical wave. It jolted her out of the place she had gone. Her eyes blinked rapidly, coming back into focus. She looked out at the sea of standing, screaming people, their faces a blur of excitement. The noise was deafening, overwhelming. She took a half step back, her body trembling now with the aftershock. She looked down at the microphone in her hand, as if she had never seen it before. She looked to her side. Lena was there, clapping. She had pasted a bright, professional smile back on her face. She stepped forward quickly, wrapping an arm around Maya's stiff shoulders, pulling her into the spotlight's center. She raised her own microphone. Incredible! Lena shouted to the crowd, her voice booming with forced cheer. See, I told you she had it in her. Give it up for Maya? The crowd roared even louder, thinking this was all part of the show, a generous moment from their star. Lena hugged Maya tighter, a public display of support. But up close, Maya could feel the tension in Lena's arm, the rigid set of her jaw. Maya stood there, trapped in the hug, a smile stuck on her own face. The adoration of the crowd washed over her, but it felt distant, like thunder from a far-off storm. The high, the freedom of the song, was gone. In its place was a hollow, buzzing feeling. The spotlight, which had felt like a prison minutes before, now felt like a fire she was standing too close to. She had done it. She had sung, and the voice that had emerged had changed everything. But as she stood there, waving weakly, with Lena's arm like a vice round her, only one thought echoed in the newfound silence inside her head, a silence that the crowd's roar could not touch. What do I do now? The noise didn't stop when the concert ended. It just changed shape. Backstage, the usual post-show chaos felt different. The crew still moved equipment, but they moved around her in a wide circle, throwing glances her way that were a mix of awe and pity. The band members gave her quick, supportive pats on the shoulder. That was insane, the guitarist muttered, shaking his head. But they said it quietly, like they were at a funeral, not a celebration. The air was thick with something unspoken. Everyone had seen Lena's face. Lena herself was a whirlwind of loud energy, surrounded by her usual cluster of assistants and friends. What a night! What a finale! She exclaimed, her voice a little too high. She embraced Maya in a tight, perfumed hug that felt like being trapped in a net. You little dark horse, you stole my show. She laughed, and the people around her laughed too, a nervous, choppy sound. It was a statement meant to sound generous, but it landed like an accusation. Maya just stood there, stiff, until Lena let go and swept away to greet VIP guests. In the dark, rattling solitude of the tour bus hours later, Maya finally took out her phone. She had kept it off all night, a habit to protect the little quiet she had. When she switched it on, the screen exploded. Notifications stacked upon notifications, text messages, emails, social media alerts until the phone grew warm and sluggish in her hand. A text from her manager. Call me, now, it's everywhere. A text from a number she didn't know. Saw the clip. Life-changing, we need to talk. Followed by the name of a famous record label executive. A text from an old friend from high school she hadn't spoken to in years. Oh my God, Maya, is that you? She opened a social media app. She didn't even have to search her name. It was the top trending topic worldwide. The video was there, from a dozen angles. The shaky, zoomed-in phone footage made it look even more dramatic. There she was, small and frozen. Then the transformation, the voice, Lena's melting smile. The title screamed, Backup Singer Destroys Superstar. The greatest audition ever wasn't an audition. Lena Vance's face says it all. The comments were a tidal wave. Thousands upon thousands of them. I've watched this 50 times and I'm sobbing. She's been hiding that for 3 years. Lena set her up to fail and it backfired spectacularly. This is the most authentic thing I've ever seen. New queen just dropped. Maya scrolled, her heart hammering. It felt like reading about a stranger. They were talking about a voice, a moment, a symbol. They weren't talking about her, the person who just wanted to go home and sleep for a week. They had built a story, the humble hero, the jealous diva, and they had slotted her into it. Whether it fit or not. By the time her bus arrived back in the city the next morning, the world had shifted. Paparazzi, a thing she had only ever seen around Lena, were waiting at the gates of the downtown depot. They shouted her name as she hurried from the bus to a waiting car. Her manager's doing. Maya, over here. How does it feel? The flashes were blinding. She kept her head down, a ball of panic tightening in her throat. The car didn't take her to her apartment. Can't, her manager said on the phone, his voice crackling with a new, frantic energy. They'll find it. They'll camp out. I've booked you a room at a hotel under a fake name. Just lay low for a day. The hotel room was quiet, but it wasn't peaceful. It was the quiet of a cage. She pulled the curtains tight, but she could feel the city humming outside, a city that now knew who she was. Her phone, plugged in and constantly buzzing, was a live wire on the desk. Every ring was a new demand. Morning talk shows, late night shows, music magazines, podcasts. Every call was an emergency, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity she couldn't possibly miss. Her manager arrived, his eyes wide with a kind of fearful excitement. He spread printouts on the bed offers, a solo record deal with a huge advance, a contract for a tell-all interview, an offer to be a surprise guest on a televised singing competition. This is it, he kept saying. Pacing. This is the break. We have to strike now, today. We need to say yes to something before the heat dies down. Maya sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the papers. The numbers on them were astronomical, more money than she had ever dreamed of, but they looked like contracts for her own arrest. Signing them felt like it would make the noise permanent, would turn the her in the video into the only her that existed. I need to think, she said, her voice a hoarse whisper. She hadn't really spoken since the stagey think. There's no time to think, her manager said, but he saw the look on her face and softened. Okay, rest today, but tomorrow, we talk strategy. He left, and the silence swooped back and, heavier than before. She tried to watch TV, but a news channel was already running a segment about overnight sensations and her clip played, in a loop in the corner of the screen. She turned it off. The worst part was the singing, or the not singing. She stood in the silent, beige hotel bathroom, the fan humming, and tried to hum a few notes. Nothing came out. It was like a door inside her had slammed shut. The thought of opening her mouth to sing, even alone, filled her with a cold dread. That moment on stage hadn't set her voice free. It had tied it to something huge and terrifying. What if she tried and only her normal, backup singer voice came out? What if she tried and failed? The whole world was watching now. The expectation was a weight on her chest, making it hard to breathe. Later that evening, a new email popped up. The subject line was simple. From a fellow traveler. It wasn't from a label or a TV producer. The name attached was one she recognized immediately, a singer, an older blues and soul legend, a woman whose career spanned decades, who was known for her raw, truthful voice and her absolute disdain for industry games. Her music had been the soundtrack to Maya's lonely teenage years. The email was short. Saw what happened. They're going to try to feed you to the machine. It will eat that beautiful sound and spit out something plastic. If you want to remember why you sing, come to my studio tomorrow. No cameras, no suits, just the music. Let me know. Below was an address in a quiet, industrial part of the city. Maya read it 10 times. This wasn't an offer. It was a lifeline. It was the first thing anyone had said to her in days that acknowledged she was a person, not a phenomenon. She looked around the silent hotel room, at the drawn curtains hiding a world that wanted a piece of her. She looked at her phone, dark and silent for a moment on the pillow. She thought of Lena's frozen smile, of the crowd's roar that felt like it was meant for someone else, of the terrifying quiet of her own voice when she tried to find it now. She picked up the phone and typed a reply, her thumbs clumsy. Only 2 words, I'll come. The address led to a part of the city the music videos never showed. It was an old brick warehouse district, quiet except for the distant groan of trucks and the cooing of pigeons. The studio wasn't marked by a flashy sign, just a faded number on a heavy metal door. Maya stood outside for a long minute, her heart doing a nervous tap dance against her ribs. This felt like the first real choice she had made since the spotlight had found her. She knocked. The door was opened by the singer herself. In person, she was smaller than Maya expected, her famous face lined with life and laughter. She wore simple, worn clothes and her eyes were sharp and kind. She looked at Maya not with the hungry curiosity of the industry, but with a deep, understanding calm. You made it, the older woman said, her voice a warm, gravelly whisper. Come in. The sharks can't find you here. Inside, it wasn't a sleek, modern studio. It was a workshop. Guitars rested on stands, a dusty piano sat in a corner, and the walls were lined with egg cartons for soundproofing. It smelled of old wood, coffee, and the faint, sweet scent of tube amplifiers. It felt like a sanctuary. "I know what you're feeling," the woman said, gesturing for Maya to sit on a worn sofa. "The noise, the fear. They want to put a name on what you did. They want to call it angry or a revenge. But it wasn't that, was it?" Maya shook her head, tears stinging her eyes unexpectedly. "No one had asked, it just came out," she whispered. "And now it's gone. I'm scared to even try." "Of course you are," the woman nodded. "That wasn't a performance. It was a lightning strike. You can't build a home where lightning struck. You have to find the ground underneath." She got up and walked to the piano. She didn't play anything grand. She played a simple, slow, rolling blues progression. It was a humble pattern, with space in it. "They want to sell the moment," she said over the music. "But you have to find the music asterisk after asterisk the moment. Don't sing for them. Don't even sing that song. Just hum. Just find a note that feels true right now." In this quiet room, Maya sat frozen for a while, listening to the gentle piano. The pressure was immense, but it was a different kind. It wasn't the pressure of millions watching. It was the pressure of one person truly listening. She closed her eyes. She thought not of the arena, but of this room, of the safety of it. She let the piano notes wash over her and, tentatively, she opened her mouth. A sound came out, soft, unsure. It wasn't the volcanic voice from the stage. It was small. It cracked. She stopped, embarrassed. "Good," the woman said, still playing. "That's real. That's today's truth. Try again." And slowly, note by note, in that safe, dusty room, Maya began to rebuild. They didn't talk about contracts or fame. They talked about where songs come from pain, from joy, from boring Tuesday afternoons. They played old spirituals and folk songs, music that belonged to no one and everyone. The older woman told stories of her own early days, of being molded and almost broken by the business, and how she fought her way back to her own sound. Maya started to visit every day. The phone in her bag would buzz endlessly. Her manager, producers, reporters, but she'd silence it. In the studio, she was just a voice again, not a symbol. Sometimes she sounded great. Sometimes she sounded terrible. And it was okay. The fear began to recede, not because the outside world had changed, but because she had found a small, sturdy place inside herself that the noise couldn't reach. Weeks passed. The viral wave began to settle into a steady hum of interest. With the older singer's guidance, Maya made a decision. She called her manager. "I'll make an album," she said, her voice firmer than it had been in months. "But on my terms. No big pop producers. I want to work with musicians who play in rooms like this. I want to write my own songs." To her surprise, the record label agreed. The buzz was still valuable, and they gave her a cautious budget. She used it to rent a small studio and hired a few session players the older legend recommended. They were people who cared more about the feel of a take than its perfect pitch. The work was hard, slow, and beautiful. It wasn't about capturing a lightning strike. It was about building a fire, brick by brick. She wrote about the quiet before the storm, the vertigo of sudden attention, the longing for the shadows, the rediscovery of a simple note in a silent room. The voice on the recordings was varied. Sometimes it was that rich, dark contralto the world had fallen for. Sometimes it was something lighter, frailer, more complex. It was human. The album was finished quietly. There was no big marketing fanfare, no attempt to recreate the drama of the arena. They released a simple, haunting ballad first, a song about listening to your own echo. It did well, not because it was a spectacle, but because it felt honest. And then came the night of her first solo show. It wasn't in an arena. It was at a respected, mid-sized concert hall known for its good acoustics and respectful crowds. As she stood in the wings, listening to the murmur of the audience, the old fear crept back. The weight of expectation. What if they only wanted the girl from the video? What if they wanted a drama? Her mentor was there, in the shadows. She placed a cool, dry hand on Maya's arm. "They're not here for a circus," she whispered. "They're here for the singer who survived one. Go give them your music." Just the music. Maya walked onto the stage. The lights were warm, not blinding. The crowd applauded, a warm, welcoming sound. She saw faces looking at her with anticipation, but not frenzy. She didn't have a band behind her yet. It was just her and a single spotlight. She adjusted the microphone, took that same deep breath from her stomach, and looked out. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice clear in the quiet hall. "This first song, it's about finding your way back to the beginning." She began to sing. Not with the explosive force of that night, but with the hard-won certainty she'd found in the warehouse studio. The voice was the same, but it was under her command now. She wasn't unleashing it. She was sharing it. She moved through songs from the new album, stories set to melody. The audience listened, rapt. They cheered in the right places. They were silent in the tender moments, near the end of the set. The opening chords of Echo began, ranged now as a slow, soulful piano ballad. A nervous ripple went through the crowd. This was the moment they'd all been secretly waiting for. Maya smiled a small, private smile. She sang it, but she made it her own. It wasn't a cry of defiance anymore. It was a reflection, a memory, a beautiful, complicated part of her story, but no longer the whole story. When she finished, the applause was thunderous, a standing ovation. But it felt different. It wasn't the shock of discovery. It was the deeper, warmer sound of recognition. They weren't applauding a viral moment. They were applauding an artist, backstage after the show, surrounded by the smell of flowers and the quiet hum of congratulations. Maya felt a calm she hadn't known in a year. The door to her dressing room opened, and there, holding a single white lily, stood Lena Vance. The air went still. Lena looked older, a little tired. The glittering armor of the superstar was gone. "That was beautiful," Lena said, her voice sincere. "Truly." She put the flower down. "I came to say, I'm sorry for that night. It wasn't my finest moment." She didn't make excuses. She just stated it. "You were always talented. I just didn't know how talented. And I was." Threatened Maya nodded, accepting the apology without words. There was nothing else to say. Lena turned to leave, then paused. "You know, they would have eaten me alive if I'd stayed in that moment," she said, almost to herself. "You did the hard thing. You built something after." When she was gone, Maya picked up the lily. The encounter felt like a chapter finally closing, not with a bang, but with a quiet, respectful turn of the page. She looked at herself in the mirror. The woman looking back wasn't the scared backup singer, nor was she the internet's overnight sensation. She was someone in between, someone more interesting. She had a path now, one she had built note by note in the quiet. The demand on that stage had been a trap, a test set in public, but the voice that had emerged after all the noise and fear had finally found its way home. It was hers, and for the first time, that felt like enough.